He's currently a professor of educational leadership at Central Michigan University and the director of leadership and development for Teach Better. After being recognized as Michigan Administrator of the Year in 2014, Dave thought he had all the answers. Personally, I'm not convinced that he doesn't. He has since learned that it's far more important to ask the questions that will help others to focus on the focus and learn for themselves what matters most. So join me in welcoming Dave Schmittou to Freeport.
Thank you. Thank you. For those of you that are in another room, I'm going to apologize or maybe give you something that you can look for. I am not going to be on camera most of the time. I'm a former middle school teacher, former elementary principal. I don't stand still. So I will be going all over the place. Feel free to even move the laptop if you need to move the laptop for me. Do what you got to do, but I will not be standing right here for long. And I'm also going to apologize. I'm looking at my watch, trying to get out in 45 minutes. It's going to be a struggle for me. I was one of those teachers in the classroom when the bell would ring. I would be that person that would always remind my students, the bell doesn't dismiss you, I do. And I would keep going. I was that teacher that every other teacher hated because my students always showed up late. So I'm going to apologize in advance before we get going. So hopefully you guys are ready to go today. Hopefully we're going to have an amazing conversation. I'm going to try my best to give you some nuggets that you can take with you today. First of all, I appreciate all of your flexibility. I know lots of changes happened last minute today. We were supposed to be in the theater. We were going to be there in a big room. We got 50 or so people hanging out in the cafeteria. We've got another 400 people scattered all over the place. So welcome wherever you are. We're going to jump into this and have some fun. So the first slide I'm looking at is an interesting one. It's one that typically starts some conversations. I'm not going to necessarily go there just yet. We're not necessarily going to have those interesting conversations and discuss the things that you might be thinking. Other than, I want to tell you that size does matter in the classrooms. Size does matter in your schools, but not necessarily in the way you're thinking. I'm a huge believer that your ego impacts instruction. Your ego impacts your influence. The bigger your ego, the smaller your influence. If you are a person that believes you have all the answers, if you're a person that believes that you can do no wrong, that you are always the smartest one in the room, I guarantee your influence is probably smaller than you could ever imagine. You know, during the introduction, and we'll talk about this later on today, some of my other sessions, I was that guy for a long time in my career that felt like I could do no wrong. I was that person that thought I had all of the answers. I was that person that believed that, what the 80s TV commercial said, never let them see you sweat. Nobody could ever rattle me. Nobody could ever see me sweat. And then I realized in some dramatic ways that my influence, my ability to change kids' lives, my ability to change adult lives was forever altered because of that. I'm going to challenge you today, especially if you're in here with me for multiple sessions today, because I'm here all day long. If you're in here with me at all today, especially right now in this keynote, if you're in another room watching this keynote, don't believe anything I say simply because I say it. Question it and challenge it. Just because your district decided to fly me up from Florida, just because they trusted me with a microphone and said, share a PowerPoint, does not mean I have any answers. I could be the guy up here just feeding you a bunch of BS today saying, pay me the money and leave it. Challenge it. Question it. Question everything that I tell you today. Push back. There'll be time for breaks today. I want you to walk up to me and say, you know that thing you said? I completely disagree. I welcome it. Bring it on. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to debate. I simply want you to be able to challenge it and question it. And if you're a classroom teacher, you better have that same influence, that same example with your kids. If you're a principal and you're a leader, that needs to be the approach you have with your staff. Just because you got the microphone doesn't mean you're the smartest one in the room. Just because somebody wrote a book doesn't make them an expert. Books, microphones are commodities today. Just because I have it doesn't give me any authority. So question it. So as you heard, my name is Dave Schmittou. I am not Charlotte Danielson. I am not here to tell you about the framework or the clusters that I developed in any way, shape, or form. My name is Dave Schmittou, and I am a dad from Florida. That's who I am. I live in Florida right now, in Pensacola, Florida, which is in fake Florida. It's right next to Orange Beach, Alabama. It's the part of Florida that nobody visits. It's the part of Florida that I can call my own. Most of you have never heard of Pensacola, Florida, and I like to keep it that way because it keeps my beaches nice and clean for me. I've got 4 kids. My oldest is a sophomore in high school. Wait, anybody here with a high school son right now? Oh, sweet Jesus. You got all the coffee. You got 2. Oh my God. Can you check and make sure that's not vodka in your bottle? Because that struggle is real, people. You talk about that last slide about not having all the answers. That is something I have to remind my son all the time. His name is Cameron. Cameron thinks he knows everything, and he knows nothing. God bless him. I've got 1 daughter. She's a princess. She can do no wrong. I truly believe that. And I have 2 other elementary kids. So 4 kids, which is why I travel a lot. When Freeport called and said, hey, you were just here this summer. Can you come back? I said, oh, yes, please. How many days do you want me? So I'm here today just hanging out. In my professional life, I am in year 23 of professional education. In that time, I've been a middle school teacher, language arts and social studies. I was a middle school assistant principal. I was a district athletic director, a middle school principal, an elementary principal, an assistant superintendent, and a full-time college professor. Some people say, holy crap, you got a lot of experience. And I simply say, or it means nobody likes me, so I had to keep job hunting. So again, you can spin the truth any way you want to. I've got a lot of experience. I've worked in multiple states. I get the opportunity to travel to a lot of different schools and poke a lot of bears and say the things that the people you work with daily can't say or won't say. But that's me in a nutshell. I tell you all that because today you're going to get the opportunity to meet my family. You're going to get the opportunity to see my kids a little bit. You're going to be able to see some home videos, just like we got to see this morning. You're going to get to know a little bit about my professional life. You're going to hear a lot of mistakes that I've made. Because I'm a firm believer that sometimes you have to be able to evaluate others. Sometimes we call that judge others before we can learn to reflect on ourselves. You look at other people and say, I would never do that. Here's what I would do instead. And that's okay. Feel free to use me as an example and say, that Schmitto guy, he's an arrogant SOB. He didn't know what he was doing. I would never do that, and here's why. Awesome. Go for it. Use whatever you get today. Take the little nuggets that you might get. Refine your own thinking. But don't say, just because Schmitto said it and he has a microphone, that we have to do it. Focus on the focus on your priorities, focus on the things that matter to you. And that's going to be the name of the game today. That's our conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about how to focus on the focus. How do we set priorities? How do we identify the things that really matter in our schools, in our classrooms, and in our daily lives? Because, I mean, let's just be real, people. And I'm going to kind of go off script a little bit. The work that you guys are doing, it's hard, and it sucks sometimes, right? It does. We can blame things on the pandemic. We can blame things on COVID. We can blame things on the fact that sometimes we're planning for face-to-face instruction and we have to go virtual and hybrid, and we've got kids that are in isolation, you're being isolated, we got to have masks on. We can blame all that. But the reality is, it was hard and it sucked 3 years ago too. But yet you're still here. You're doing the work. You're doubling down and saying, I want to make a difference, which is amazing. So how do we help you identify why you're still here, how to do the work that matters without feeling like there's one more thing being strapped on your back? So you don't feel like you're on another marathon hike with your backpack getting heavier and heavier and heavier. How do you identify the things that matter most? It's real. And if you haven't noticed today, throughout the course of this, I'm going to say some things that maybe others haven't said, couldn't say, shouldn't say maybe. I'm going to challenge you to do the same thing. I'm a big believer that taboo topics do not belong in education. I'm a big believer that we have to be able to have these conversations around our tables and in our classrooms with each other as adults so that we can continue to grow. So be ready. We're going to be having some of those conversations today. Got an image on the screen that I want to focus on for a few minutes. This is really the moral of the story. This is an image that I think reflects what we've done wrong in education for at least the last 23 years that I've been in education. Probably a whole lot longer, but my experience dates back to only 23 years in education. It's a picture, for those of you that can't see it, of an elephant. And at the bottom of the image, you can see the elephant is roped to a stake. The rope is approximately 6 feet long. Let me tell you the story behind this image. Father of 4 kids, I spent a lot of time with my oldest son every single year on his birthday for his first 10 years of his life, taking him to the circus every single year. Before Barnum and Bailey and Ringling Brothers went out of business, the circus would come to, when I lived in Michigan, would come to Michigan every November. My son's birthday is in November, and every year he would say, "Dad, can we go to the circus?" And I would say, "Yes." The first time I took him to the circus, he was terrified. He thought it was like a Halloween show. He saw tigers and motorcycles. But the thing that scared him the most at the circus was the elephants. We sat up in the bleachers, and I remember him saying to me one time as a 4-year-old, "Dad, are the elephants gonna come eat me?" I said, "No. First of all, the elephants don't eat meat." So then he said, "Are they gonna step on me?" I said, "No." And he said, "What stops them?" It's an interesting question. For those of you that have ever been to the circus before, at a circus, there's no fence. The animals aren't chained up. Sometimes there's a man with a whip. Big elephants, sometimes there's tigers, lots of big things that could hurt little kids at a circus just walking around on parade. So what stops an elephant from trampling a bunch of little kids at the circus? It's actually a fascinating story. So when elephants are bred in captivity, as soon as they're born, the trainers take the elephant, tie a rope around their front left leg, and attach a 6-foot rope to a stake. The elephant is in its infancy, begins to believe that its world has a 6-foot radius. It begins to believe it can only travel around that stake. It begins to believe that that's all it can do. It's small, it doesn't have the strength to break free, and it starts to travel in a 6-foot radius. That rope stays attached to that elephant until it's mature, until it's an adult, until it's ready to go into the circus, until it's ready to be set free. But what's ironic about this situation is that the elephant, even when the rope is cut so that it can go into the circus, still feels like its world revolves around a 6-foot radius. It's all it knows. It feels like it can only go so far. It feels like its world has been restricted. Teachers, educators, administrators. Hopefully this doesn't insult you, but I believe you've been treated like elephants throughout your career. I believe that what we've done to educators, at least in my time, the last 23 years, is treat you just like the circus treated elephants for a long time. We put so many restrictions around you. We said, do this, don't do that. Focus on this one more thing, that you felt like you couldn't do anything on your own. You felt like you didn't have the power that you truly have. You felt like all of the other things in the world had a bigger influence than you did. It's all about the curriculum, it's all about the book, it's all about the pacing guide, it's all about the test, it's all about all these things that you've forgotten your influence, and your strength, and your power. Eventually, somebody comes through with a microphone and says, "I'm going to cut the rope and set you free." You say, "Great." You go back to your room and you still feel like you got that rope tied around you. And you feel like you can't do the stuff that really matters. And you lose sight of your power and your influence. Now, what's interesting about this story is Barnum and Bailey, the circuses, are no longer in business. Do we know why? They got sued for animal cruelty. People heard this, saw this, videotaped this, and said, "That's not right. You shouldn't treat animals that way. That's not fair. You gotta let them go. You gotta let them be free." There's a metaphor in here that I'm not necessarily going to tackle right now about what's happening in education today and how so many teachers are leaving the profession, how so many leaders are leaving the profession because they feel like their power isn't being recognized, because they feel like they don't have the ability to make the decisions that matter, that truly influence kids in their lives. recognize that you do have the ability to focus on the things that only you can do. Not the things that computer software can do, not the things that a textbook can do, not the things that good worksheet can do, but the things that you can do as an educator, as a principal, as a teacher, whatever your role is. Your responsibility is to own your responsibility and embrace your strength. Cool little story I'm going to tell you real quick. Anybody know who this guy is? Elliott Kipchoge? Who is he? Oh, you are so good. Yes. Oh, Elliott is an amazing man. So what Elliott did is he accomplished something that the world throughout humanity thought was going to be impossible. Just give you a little perspective. Elliott Kipchoge went out and ran a marathon in less than 2 hours. For those of you with a little calculator, let me give you this stuff so you can calculate the math behind this. Marathon, 26.2 miles. And he did it in 1 hour, 59 minutes, and 40 seconds. Prior to him, it was thought to be impossible to do. If you calculate that out, it is about a 4-minute and 30-second pace for 26.2 miles. What the what? That is crazy. A couple weeks ago, I went out and I challenged my 10th grade son to a race because he was talking some smack and I had to show him who the real man in the house was. And I went out and we raced. I said, we're going to run a mile. We went to his high school track and we ran. He stopped at like 2 laps, so miles, 4 laps around. I kept going because I had to show him up. And I got done. I was huffing and puffing in the fetal position, sucking my thumb when I got done. And I looked down at my watch. It was 6 minutes and 48 seconds. I was going all out for 1 mile. And I was almost 7 minutes. This guy went to 26.2 miles at a 4-minute and 30-second pace, which is insane. Again, throughout humanity, people thought there's no way that's possible. Nobody could ever do it. Now, his feat, though, was not without controversy. For those of you that know this story, there's some interesting things that go behind it. So first of all, Elliott trained for this his whole life. He's been a marathon runner. He's won multiple marathons before, the biggest races ever, but he never run that fast. He got an entire team behind him. He was sponsored by Nike. He was paid $1 million to train for this feat. He wore some shoes that some people say, oh, I'm not sure if those shoes make us legitimate or not because they have a little extra spring in their step. But this picture, I think, sums up more than anything else how he was able to accomplish this feat. For those of you that can't see it from the back, let me just describe the picture to you. So first of all, Elliott is the guy in this picture in white. He's surrounded by 7 or 8 other people, depending on at what point of the race he was running. 7 or 8 people that rotated out every 2 miles to be rabbits or sprinters or windbreakers for him. They were people that were charged with going out there and running 4-minute, 30-second miles for a mile or two, and somebody else would step in. They were pacers to help him to know how fast he had to run. They were also people that formed an arrow around him to make it more aerodynamic. Then he had a car placed in front of him that blocked the wind as well. And as you can see in the image, there's this crazy cool green laser that looks like it's blasting a hole through the road. That laser was set up on a car that was programmed to go exactly the speed needed to break the 2-hour marathon record. That car was broadcasting a laser to the ground so that Elliott just had to look at the step in front of him, and at every step, his goal was land on the laser beam, land on the laser beam, every single step. In order to break the marathon record, he could have gone out there and said, I'm going to do this on my own, I'm going to go run a marathon, I'm just going to go as fast as I can. Or he said, I can assemble an army around me, put a car in front of me that just lets me focus on the step in front of me. And that's what he did. For 26.2 miles, Elliott looked straight down at the step in front of him and said, all I got to do is hit the laser beam. All I got to do is hit the laser beam. If I'm falling behind, I got to speed up and catch up to the laser beam. If I get ahead of the laser beam, it's okay. I can slow down. I just got to hit the laser beam. 26.2 miles, step after step, he focused on the step in front of him and accomplished the impossible because he focused on the focus. He focused on the next step, not the end of the race, not the finish line, the next step. He's a beast. I don't want to take anything away from him. You can shoot all the laser beams at me that you want to. You can give me rollerblades for my shoes. I'm still not running as fast as he did. He did it because he trained hard, he worked hard, he put in all of the things needed to ahead of time. But on race day, he said, I'm just going to focus on the focus. I'm going to focus on what's right in front of me. So as we go today, my challenge to you is, how do you focus on the stuff in front of you? How do you focus on the focus? How do you put laser beams in front of you to say, let me just focus on the next thing, the right thing, the next step, not all the things that I have that constantly inundates my life and inundate my world. In just a second, I'm going to do one of those things that we hate when presenters do, when they actually make you turn and talk to somebody. This is that opportunity where some of you are going to say, I'm going to go to the bathroom. He's not going to know that I'm not talking to somebody. I'm going to fill up my coffee. I'm just going to pick up the phone and act like my kids are calling me. If you're in another room right now, sorry, you're trapped. You're going to have to talk to the people near you. Okay, this is one of those activities where you're going to just talk to some people for a second, but first, you're going to be reflecting before you turn and talk. Okay? I'm going to give you a series of questions that I want you to think through. And then in a minute, you're going to turn and talk to somebody about your answers. See, we already got people rolling. I knew it was going to happen. See? Called out. All right, so here's the what ifs. I want you to imagine that this morning, you woke up, and you realized my alarm didn't go off. Oh no, I got 5 minutes to get out of the door. What do you do in those 5 minutes? What are the most essential tasks for you to do in the morning when you wake up with only 5 minutes to spare? Okay, don't answer it necessarily yet. I want you to think. What do you do if you only have 5 minutes? If some of you are like, this is every single day. I got this. Let me just tell you what happened this morning. Right? It's all right. I want you to think about it. Don't necessarily answer it out loud yet. You'll get that opportunity. Don't look at your neighbor and say, obviously you don't brush your teeth. It's okay. The next question that I want you to think through, and again, you'll answer these out loud in a second. Let's imagine that you found out, and for some of you, this might be the reality, that this is your last year in the classroom. Oh man, it's your last year of doing what you do. Which means evaluations, right? Some of you are like, yep, I got that. What do you do? What do you do differently? What do you focus on if this is your last year? What if today, or more specifically tomorrow, you recognize as your last day ever in front of kids? What if tomorrow was your last day to ever teach, to lead, to work in a school? And you know it ahead of time. You go into the day saying, I know that today is my last day. What do you do? What do you do with the kids and those people that you influence? Does it change? Do your priorities change? It's that awkward silence I warned you about right now. Some of you are thinking. Some of you are thinking, okay, he said we're gonna have to share. Who do I make eye contact with? In just a second, I'm gonna ask for you to share any of the answers that you're comfortable sharing with people that are near you. You can get up and move across the room if the person that you really want to talk to is way over there. This is your opportunity to get a digit or something. Feel free. Go talk to them if you want to. You're going to get about 3 minutes to have this conversation. What do you focus on in the morning, in your last year, or your last day? Those are your choices. 3-minute conversation. Have fun.
Some like that moments, right? Got it. Appreciate it. Yep.
He said I was in my early 40s with a lot of life before me, when a moment came that stopped me on a dime. I spent most of the next days looking at the x-rays, talking about the options, and talking about
Warren, 2 minutes left.
time. I asked him when it sank in that this might really be the real end. How's it hit you when you get that kind of news? Man, what'd you do? And he said, I went skydiving, I went Rocky Mountain climbing, I went 2.7 seconds on a bull named Blue Manchu, and I looked deeper and I spoke sweeter and I
Last minute, so focus on the last thing you need to say. You got 1 minute left.
And he said, someday I hope you get the chance to live like you were dying. He said I was finally the husband, but most of the time I wasn't. And I became a friend would like to have. And all of a sudden going fishing wasn't such an imposition. And I went 3 times that year, I lost my dad. Well, I finally read the good book, and I took a good long hard look at what I'd do if I could do it all again.
All right, ladies and gentlemen,
And then
get your attention
I
back.
went skydiving, I went Rocky Mountain climbing, I went 2.7 seconds.
I know there are a few of you that want me to keep playing the Tim McGraw song. I got you. I'm with you. But Ray Hewitt, I don't know how many of you know Ray hanging out over there. Ray Hewitt is a great friend of mine. She works with me. She looked at me and said, "You're playing country music. What are you doing, Dave? We got to fix this." It's breaking my heart. But the reality is, for those of you that hate it, I forced you to talk louder. For those of you that loved it, you were able to listen into the message. The song, for those of you that don't know it, is "Live Like You Were Dying" by my hero on earth, Tim McGraw. And the story behind it is, it's a fascinating one. Basically, what would you do if you found out that your last days are coming? What are the things that you would choose to do? What your bucket list items? Where would you focus your energies? And he tells the stories of all the things that he would do and the things that you would focus on, which is similar to the conversation you were having. Maybe not necessarily in the same dark place, but some of you, it was like paradise. Oh my gosh, my job is ending and I get to do anything I want. What do I focus on? I got a few extra minutes of sleep. What do I get to focus on? And the reality is, no matter what you said, your answers were probably all different. I did hear some of you talk about some of the things that you would skip. I actually heard somebody, not going to call them out, who said, "I'm starting my coffee and I don't care if I get to brush my teeth." That's awesome. That's a priority. Because after a big old cup of coffee, who cares and who notices, right? And you got masks on. We know our middle school people would say, "I probably don't even need to shower because nobody's going to be able to tell that day anyway." Right? You got your different priorities based on your circumstances, your realities, what's going on in your world and your life. You already know in your head what your priorities are. And you've heard the saying before. You want to know where somebody's priorities are? Look at their bank account and look at their calendar. Figure out how they spend their time and how they spend their money. Right? In your classroom, in your school, it's the same thing. Where you spend your time is where your focus is. Where do you put your energies? Where do you focus your attention? And for those of us that say, "Well, I don't have control over those sorts of things. Somebody's constantly telling me what I have to do, when I have to be there." Sorry, Mike, I'll BS on that. Again, we're cutting the rope today. You have a lot of control. You have a lot of power to figure out what the priorities are and where to focus your energies. And again, there's no right answer. There is no silver bullet or magic pill. I am not going to stand up here today in any of these sessions and say, here is the answer. If you just do this, everything's going to work out in your classrooms and in your schools. If you just do this thing, all of that data that you heard about, or data, depending on your own vernacular, it's all going to be magically changed and fixed. That's not the reality. Because if that was the reality, we would have done that a long time ago and everything would be amazing. The reality is there are a lot of possibilities. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you some possibilities, but not the definitive gospel. Although the things are written in red on the screen, my words are not, okay? This is more of the Constitution than it is the Bible. We can have some amendments, we can fix things, tweak things, and adjust things today. So listen, adjust, adapt, and evolve. Similarly, just because it's something you've always done in your classroom doesn't necessarily make it right either. So we'll talk about that in a second. 95%. This is a number you're going to hear me talk about ad nauseum. 95% is a number, and I like to pull out a lot because I think it's a number that explains some of our struggles, some of our issues, and some of our successes. You heard this morning that there's going to be this new concerted focus around Danielson's clusters. Charlotte Danielson, it's a name that we've now heard for 15 years in education. We've heard about a lot of her work and her frameworks and the 22 domains and all of those 22 indicators, 4 domains, 6 clusters. We've heard about it in a lot of different ways. Another researcher that we've heard a lot about over the last 2 decades is John Hattie. John Hattie is a person, we've got some people that preach John Hattie. For those of you that don't know who John Hattie is, John Hattie is a researcher from New Zealand. Got an amazing accent, so it makes him sound even smarter than he is. John Hattie is a researcher who did the biggest meta-analysis in the history of education. A meta-analysis is basically when you go out and you study studies that have already been done. He went out and said, there are a lot of people with microphones and books professing to have the answer in education. They can't all be right. So let me go study their studies and figure out what actually works. And his analysis was pretty cool. The first thing that he discovered is that 95% of what's happening in schools across North America, Europe, and Asia is good stuff. 95% of what teachers are doing in their classrooms works, and it's having an impact on kids. That is good news, isn't it? Regardless of the decisions you're making in your classroom, whatever you focus your energies on, you're not screwing up kids. 95% of the decisions that you make are the right decisions. That is awesome. So where's the downside? The downside is not about the 5%, because typically we avoid talking about the 5%. Most of you aren't doing the 5% of things that actually hurt kids. Like holding kids back, retaining kids, and saying you have to repeat a grade, we know that that hurts kids. Labeling, sorting, selecting kids, we know that hurts kids. You don't do that, so we're not going to talk about that. So why would it be bad news that 95% of what you're doing in your classrooms is good? Well, the issue is what John Hattie continued to say in his research. 95% of the things that you do in your classroom are good and they work, but not everything works as well as everything else. There are some things that are more effective than other things. There are some things that are gooder than the others. 95% is good, but what's the goodest? And that's what his research went on to say. The 95% rule is why sometimes we struggle to move the needle. I know in this space, the live room in here, I've got a lot of administration leaders. How many of you are school leaders in some capacity? Okay, so this half of the room, you'll be able to understand what I'm talking about. You go out and you identify something that is considered a best practice. I'm using that in air quotes. Best practices has typically become in vogue for, somebody wrote a book, I had a microphone about it, so we say it's best now, although it's not. So we go and we identify a best practice, we present it to teachers and say, this is going to be what we do. And teachers say, why do I need to do another new thing? What I'm doing in my classroom is good. It's working. Why do I need to change? And the reality is, teachers, educators, you're absolutely right. What you're doing in your classroom is good and it's working. The issue is, a lot of that good stuff is not as good as it could be, and it's wasting a lot of your energy, resources, and efficiencies. What Hattie's research did is he went back and he said, what we can do is we can focus on a few key things. If we focus on the focus, then we'll make dramatic impacts. If you focus on a couple of things at a time, then a lot of amazing things are going to be happening. As opposed to doing what we've done over the last 23 years in education, is turning what is a good sandwich into this huge club sandwich, just adding one more layer, one more layer, one more layer, without ever taking things off of your plates. So we're at the place now where educators are saying, that's a whole lot of stuff you're asking me to do now. There's other things I'd rather do. Part of my goal today is to give you the initiative to say, can I take some things off my plate and truly just focus on my priorities? How do I focus on the things that matter most? As opposed to saying I need to drill in and focus on 1,000 things, how can we identify a couple of things? I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the things that Hattie really focuses in on. I could, but I'm not John Hattie either, just like I'm not Charlotte Danielson. You can go read it. You can go study it. You can go on Pinterest and just take a screenshot of it and say, cool, I've studied it now. Go ahead. There's a lot of things on there. You can identify the things that really matter most. But the thing that I do want to focus on briefly today is on this image, the thing at the very, very top, collective teacher efficacy. What this graphic represents are the things that matter the most. What is collective teacher efficacy? It means we're all rowing in the same direction. We all have the same beliefs, the same values, the same mission. We talk to each other and we all understand things. And we all have the same priorities, the same values, the same focus, which means those taboo topics can't exist because we're all having conversations about what we value and what's important. That is the single biggest driver of student achievement. It's not, I'm an amazing teacher, I'm going to close my door and mind my own business. I'm going to do some amazing things for kids in my room. That's cool. You're wasting a lot of energy, resources, and you're sacrificing student achievement and growth as a result. The research is clear. Collective teacher efficacy matters more than anything else. So today, you're going to have opportunities to talk, to share, to grow, to push back. Not because Dave Schmidt thinks it's the right thing to do, but because John Hattie, who studied 800,000 studies that reflect about 3 million kids, said it's the thing that matters most. If you're a school leader and you have meetings set up with your teachers, PLCs, and you're not encouraging people to have critical conversations, push, challenge, reflect, and grow, then you're missing an opportunity for students to learn. One of the things we need to focus on is collective teacher efficacy. We'll talk a little bit about the clusters. We'll talk about how this blends in with Charlotte Danielson. We're going to talk about how this impacts all of the things. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here, though, and break down Charlotte Danielson for you. It's not my responsibility right now to go there. We could talk about Bloom's taxonomy. We could talk about depth of knowledge. We can talk about a lot of those things in a second. I will point out one key variable for you. This is a Dave Schmidt-ism. This is actually some research that I have done in my past. So one of the things that I had the opportunity to do as a professor was do a study where I got the opportunity to observe and evaluate about 2,500 classrooms nationwide. Got to go into classrooms and say, how are teachers actually teaching? Are they hitting the mark? And an interesting observation was made. Take this or leave it. Again, we'll talk about this at a later session. Just going to plant this little seed for later on. In America's schools, we have standards. Common Core standards are the driving factor. That's what was studied here. 82% of standards as written in American schools from kindergarten through 12th grade reflect the ability for students to be able to analyze, create, or evaluate. Analyze or a bump. Do something with their learning. When we went into 2,500 classrooms, what we noticed was that in 78% of classrooms, teachers only got students to understand material. In other words, cheat off of me. That's what understand and recall means. Think about the irony of this in your classrooms and in your schools. Oftentimes you have policies and procedures that say, if you cheat off of your peer, you're going to the office. Don't copy off of somebody else. But you want an A in my classroom? Copy off of me. Just say everything that I said and put it back on a sheet of paper. You're going to get an A. That's interesting. Don't copy your peers, just copy the teacher. And leaders, you tend to say, teachers, we want you to be autonomous. We want you to make the instructional decisions that matter most. And to do that, I want you to do everything I tell you to do and do it the way that I did it when I was a classroom teacher. The standards say, apply, create, and evaluate. What we do is we tell students, regurgitate and spit back what I just shared with you. Interesting. Again, we'll break that down later on today as well. But I also want to throw this out here that the answer is not simply changing the objectives you have on your whiteboard. If you're saying, so the secret sauce, Dave, the thing I'm taking away from all of this is if I go into my classroom right now, go on my whiteboard and change the objectives. It's So it doesn't say students will be able to understand. I say students will be able to apply. Poof, they're all going to learn it all. No, no, no. That's not the answer. Nor is the answer really studying Bloom's taxonomy, Webb's depth of knowledge, Piaget, Maslow, all of those things. We've heard about all those things, right? Remember your undergrad experience when you took talent development classes, no matter what you're teaching, you had to learn about Maslow before Bloom. You learned about Piaget and zone of proximal development. You learned about Bloom's taxonomy, and you learned about Webb's depth of knowledge. All of those things are super, super, super important. Those are all things that we're going to unpack later on today. If you care to, and if you want to stick around here, we'll talk about all those things. We'll talk about the differences behind it. If you're sitting right now in this space or wherever you are, and you're like, I actually have never heard of those things. I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, that's going to be one of our challenges. I'm going to hopefully educate you a little bit on those things as we go today, because they're all super important. The reality, though, teaching is hard work. It is hard. You heard that this morning. Teaching is hard. Teaching is super hard. Teaching is not showing up 5 minutes before class, coming in and doing a song and a dance, and just making sure that kids are happy. That is not what teaching is about. Leadership is hard. Leadership does not mean showing up 5 minutes before your teacher's turning on the lights and making sure the AC and the heaters are working. There's a lot involved to it. There's so much involved in teaching and learning and growing kids into successful human beings. It is hard. It takes a concerted focus. It takes a concerted energy to stay focused on the focus. Again, we're going to be breaking this down as we go throughout the day. Teaching requires doing. How many of you remember your first couple days in the classroom after student teaching, after being credentialed and certified, wondering, looking yourself in the mirror saying, what in the world am I doing? I wasn't prepared for this, right? You graduated from college after 4 years of study, got yourself certified, you probably even framed a certificate somewhere. You walked into a classroom and thought, I have no idea what I'm doing. The reality is the only way to become a better teacher is to teach. As a parent of 4 kids, when my wife came to me with the news that we were expecting our first kid, I was like, oh, sweet, I'm gonna be able to play catch every single day in the backyard. I'm gonna go to all the soccer games and baseball games and basketball games. And then I started to realize, oh man, I've actually never held a kid before. I've never changed a diaper before. I should probably figure that stuff out. So I went to the library and got a bunch of books about parenting, parenting for dummies and everything. I read them all. I was ready. And then Cameron was born. I thought, holy crap, I know nothing. The only way to learn how to parent is to parent. The only way to know how to teach is to teach. The only way for students to do whatever you're teaching in your classrooms is for them to do the work as well. You can have them read all you want. They can listen to you all you want, but they're not going to learn. One of the things I want you to do today, in whatever sessions you go to, is spend a lot of time reflecting on what you do, how you do it, and where you focus your energies. Do you spend all your time in your classroom just talking at kids? Do you spend all your time in your classroom pushing worksheets? Where do you focus your energies? Because where you focus matters. Where you put your energy matters. Teachers, you matter. You matter more than any other person in the school system, period. Teachers, you matter more than any textbook, any curriculum, any weird bald guy with a microphone. You matter. Your influence is greater than any others. If you choose to say, nope, I'm tied to a rope, I have to just go get the right textbook, the right worksheet, I have to go on Teacher Pay Teacher and Pinterest because those people know more than I do, all you're doing is abdicating your responsibility and keeping yourself shackled. You matter. You have more influence over student achievement, student learning, student growth than anything else. I just got my cue that I've got like 3 minutes left. If you choose to come back for other sessions, I'm going to walk you through the how you do this. I'm going to give you examples of things that you can do. I'm going to give you examples of ways that you can connect with kids to actually push them, grow them, inspire them. I'm going to give you examples of how you can truly change your classroom, be transformative, and focus on the focus and focus on the priorities. But I'll tell you one thing that you can do today. is you can stop saying that the things you're doing in your class are going to set kids up for tomorrow or the future. Hogwash, people. If you focus so much on who kids are going to become, you lose sight on who they are today. Focus on the kids in front of you. Focus on the fact that you've got 12-year-olds in front of you, you got 17-year-olds in front of you, you got 6-year-olds in front of you. You don't have future adults in front of you. Your job is not to say, I'm going to create the next future adult. Your focus right now is, I'm going to create the best human being I have. Kids are living their lives right now. They don't begin their lives when they leave school. They are living their lives right now. Which means if all the connections you make to kids, when they say, why do we need to learn this? And all the connections you make are how they might need this someday, change your focus. Kids don't care about someday. Kids care about today. Just like if I were to tell you, teachers, you're going to need all of this stuff in 5 years in your classrooms. I'm just setting the stage for you right now, planting the seeds, because in 5 years, this is going to be the future of education. You're going to tune me out and say, okay, come back to me in 5 years. Kids are doing the same thing to you. Focus on who they are today. The connection should not be to who they'll be as an adult, because you have no idea. As you go through your day today, again, continue to be vulnerable, continue to be transparent, continue to be a risk taker, continue to push back on not only the ideas and beliefs of the people that are speaking, but yourself as well. Sometimes admitting your greatest weakness is actually your greatest strength. In the next session, I'm going to be telling you guys a whole lot of vulnerable stories. And I'm going to apologize in advance because it's going to get raw, it's going to get gross, it's going to get dirty. I'm going to tell you guys about the utter failure of a human being that I am. But I do that to also tell you about how I came out on the other side. I'm going to tell you about the horrible teacher I was and the mistakes that I made and how awful I was to kids. As a principal, I'll tell you about the mistakes I made to teachers. How in my very first year as a principal, my goal was to drive out 7 veteran teachers. Why? Because they thought they knew more than me, and I wasn't going to tolerate that. And I did it. I won that battle. And I was so proud of myself for a day. The reality is, we do the same thing in our classrooms with kids, challenge us and question us, and we'll talk about that later on. Here's what I want you to question. I'm going to leave it with this, because I know you've got sessions you've got to go to, and I'm getting the hook. As you focus on the focus today, when you're thinking about how you prioritize your time, your energies, and your resources, are you preparing students for your past or for their future? In education, we do a great job of preparing our students to be successful as teachers someday. Meaning we're teachers, we're educators. The things that we went through in school worked for us because they got us to where we are. We're proud of who we are. We're proud of what we do. So we spend a lot of our time and energy saying, it worked for me, it's going to work for you. The question is, are you preparing students for your past or their future? Use that as your filter, use that as your lens in all the decisions that you make. Am I doing this because it worked for me or because it's best for them? It's a big question to ask yourself. Again, we'll break it down in greater detail. That's the focus of all of the work that's happening in this district. When we look at Danielson's clusters, when we look at Marzano, when we look at Hattie, when any of the big researchers out there, that's the focus, is on how teachers can make those instructional shifts, focus on the priorities, focus on the things that matter most, and this is the biggest one. We say it's all about the kids. Every decision we make is about the kids. That's our company line. So is it? Are the decisions you make in your classroom about the kids? When you come back from your break, if you're coming back in here, be ready. We're going to get real. We're going to get practical and tactical, is one of my best friends in the world likes to say, make it practical and tactical. Whatever session you go to today, look for those takeaways, look for those nuggets that you can use, or look for the things that you can spit out. Look for the things that you can embrace, look for the things that you can challenge. Because ultimately, you're the one that goes back in front of those kids in those classrooms. Accept the responsibility, accept the authority, accept the challenge, and know that you make the difference. On that, you now have 12 minutes to get where you need to go, find your coffee, find your friends, and I'll see most of you right back here. Everybody else, I'll see you soon. Which ones were those? Let's see.